Life is complicated, or at least that's how it feels. We fill our days, stretch our limits, chase more, carry more, and then wonder why we end up burned out, stretched thin, and just trying to keep up. But what if the problem isn't life? What if we've just complicated what was never meant to be? This is It's Complicated, a series about cutting through the noise, getting back to what matters most, and rediscovering the simplicity of a life grounded in faith, family, and purpose. Each episode, I'll take one area of life that feels tangled, expose the lie that's keeping it that way, and bring it back to truth. Because clarity brings peace. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to be complicated. Let's get into it. Well, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Coffee with Phil. And it is Sunday afternoon, and welcome to the studio. A bit of a different routine this week, and taking some time on a Sunday afternoon while a certain person is having a nap to come into the studio and spend time with you guys. And had a good weekend, good family weekend, good time of connection and celebrating life, and feeling really good about it. I have to say, though, that I think I confessed last week. I've done a lot of confessing lately, but I'm pretty sure I spoke to you about the challenges I was having with my coffee and trying to get to the bottom of just how sometimes there has been just a really not so flash coffee coming out of my machine or out of the corner of the kitchen, and quality in, quality out, crap in, crap out. And so I've been trying to locate the source of the problem. And coffee's a bit of science. The beans are fresh, good quality beans. So the next thing to check is that, at the other end is the machine is clean. Yep, sorted that out. So really, what's happening next is having a look at the quality of the grind and the consistency of the grind. And I have a borrowed grinder, a second-hand grinder, not a great grinder by confession of the one who loaned it to me, which is not a criticism, it's just understanding what you're working with. And so what I've been doing over the last 3 days is I have been weighing the product that comes out at the bottom of the grinder based on the settings that I have given the grinder. So what you're basically doing is dialing in your grind and your grinder to allow the coffee machine to produce the output that you want, because pretty much every coffee machine, you don't adjust the coffee machine. Let's just say at our level. But the point is, I was testing the weight of the grind. So I've got a little grind cup there, and I zero off the scale, good quality coffee scale, so no problem with calibration. And look, the range of different outputs that I had just in making the coffees this morning for the family it ranged from 16.8 grams up to a wide variety up to 19.1. Now that's a massive range of 1.3 grams of ground coffee with all I'm doing is pushing a button. Haven't changed the settings, just what I'm saying is I'm just getting such an inconsistent output, which will be why the quality of the espresso pour has been a little erratic. So don't worry, folks, I'm not suffering. What I'm now doing is measuring, zeroing off the scales, measuring what's ground, and then adding or subtracting to get exactly 18 grams of ground coffee, which I then put in the portafilter, tamp to 35 pounds of pressure, consistently flat to allow the flow to be even, and I'm getting a much better espresso pour. So thank you for those that were submitting your prayers to heaven on my behalf for the errant ways of my coffee making, but it looks like we're back on track. Isn't that good? Well, let us get to the focus of the podcast, because, funnily enough, we're in a series called It's Complicated, and the focus of today is your focus. So perhaps my confession will have a little bit more context when we understand that we make life complicated, I think. This is the whole premise of the series, is that we make life complicated. We make it way more complicated than God intended. And I've spoken to you about faith, and I've spoken to you about family, and I've spoken to you about finances. And this week I'm speaking to you about your focus. I'm going to propose to you, we make our lives complicated as a means of control. And look, in the case of my coffee, I am absolutely trying to control the outcome to the finest detail, micro of grams, because it matters, but it's making my life very complicated. And I think, if we look at life in the broader sense, Jesus keeps reminding us that his Father, who is by adoption our Father also, is above all things, is in fact in all things, and therefore is over all things. And I've been spending time lately to remind myself of this very, very simple concept that I have just errantly complicated in so many areas of my life. I've been reading, to remind myself of this, I've been reading the Sermon on the Mount as recorded and given to us in its comprehensive nature by Matthew, the scribe Matthew, who wrote us the Gospel of Matthew. And so I've been reading the Sermon on the Mount, and you can find it for yourself. Start at Matthew chapter 5 and work your way through. Do not rush, friends. Do not rush that. What I want to do today is I want to zero in on the last verse, the key verse that's been speaking to me this past week, and it's the last verse of what is chapter 6. So Matthew chapter 6 and verse 34. And the Bible says, therefore, Jesus is bringing to conclusion a thought. He says, therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And that has caused me to cease from rushing onward and to pause and linger and ask the Spirit of God to enlighten the Word of God, that I might come into an awareness of what God is saying to me. And I've also been reading it in a little bit of some older translations. So the one in my notes here, it says, verse 34 has a part in it that says, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. And I want to talk about that. I want to perhaps zoom in on it, talk about a few things, but my goal here, as I enjoy my delicious latte in the afternoon, is to reflect on it in such a way that causes you to then think about, are there ways that you are complicating your life beyond what Jesus perhaps would have you do in his instruction? So first a reality check. Let's look at this and be really honest. Why don't you be really honest about where you're at in your world? Why do we so often try and work out every possible angle, every possible outcome, and play out the consequences in order that we might, to the finest degree of detail, work things out in such a complicated way? I'll give you an example. I was reminded of this during the week. When I was a young fella, perhaps early in my teens, I read a lot of books. And there was a time where the genre of books that I liked was kind of like adventure fiction. And, so think, for those of you old enough, think Famous Five, but then go on from that. And there was a genre of book that my mum found for me at the library, and then she'd take me and I'd go and find some more of them. And they were adventure fiction, but they allowed you to choose your own path through the story. And so you'd get to the end of this section or even a page, and it would say, okay, you and Timmy now have to decide what to do next. And so if you want to go and follow the dog down the winding trail into the dark woods, turn to page 132. If you would like to attack the bear that is running towards you from under the trees, then turn to page 179. And so you were a little bit of a master of your own destiny. But of course, you didn't want to make the wrong choice. And you're kind of, as a 12-year-old, you're wrapped up in the adventure story. And so sometimes you'd keep your finger in the page. This is what I would do. I'd literally keep my finger there and I'd go, okay, well, if I'm going to follow the dog down the trail, then I'm going to turn to this page here, and I would read it and go, oh, I don't like the sound of that. So I'd get back to where my finger was marking it and say, oh, that's right, there's a bear coming at me. Well, maybe I'll turn and I'll attack that because I might have something in my bag that would help me. And so I would turn to that page 179, and all of a sudden I'd realise that, yes, I have to open my bag and pull out the tool that the wizard had given me, and I'd be able to attack the bear and turn it into a mouse, and you're like, oh, that's the better choice to make. But I think, guys, we do that. We try and do that in our lives. We're kind of like, oh, well, if I did this, is that the right thing? And does God want me to do that? And what if I did that? And if he wasn't happy, what would happen? And if he wasn't happy, what would happen? And then what would I do next? And then how would I feel about that? And what would other people think of what I was doing in that space? And then how could I come back from that? That'd just be devastating. So we backtrack to where we put our finger in the marker, in the page, and we go, oh, what if I did something different? And what if God did this? And what if I did that? And then because I did that, God did this? And then if so-and-so said this, and then we were in the same place at the same time and we could do this, that might work out better. And this is our prayer life. But is it a prayer life? And I'm going to have some coffee, so pause on that, and then I'll come back to you and explain what I mean. Oh, glorious, glorious, glorious days. I can report that the machine is pouring very, very well today, based on the quality input of 18 grams of well-ground, well-roasted, fresh coffee. I just want to let you know that. Let's get back to the concept of how we complicate our focus. Because what I would say to you is that we're trying to control things. That's what makes our focus so complicated, is we spend our energy trying to control all the inputs, control all the possibilities, control all the possible outcomes and our reaction to said outcomes, and then look at that beyond the scope of our abilities, and our focus just gets so complicated. And I would say to you that control is the antithesis of faith, meaning if you put control and faith in the same sentence, they are at far ends away from each other. In fact, they are not anywhere near the same thing. So it's a juxtaposition, because what that means is you've got a conflicting contrast where you put things side by side in a way that makes them stand apart as quite distinct. So control is one end of the spectrum and faith is the other end of the spectrum. And I would say to you, control is not faith and faith is not control. This is what I want to focus on a little bit today as we talk about it being complicated. That is our focus being complicated. So let's turn, if you would, in your mind, or as long as you're not driving or washing the dishes with both hands in the sink, turn, if you will, to Matthew chapter 6 and verse 34 and have a look at it. Jesus says, therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient is the day for its own trouble. And that's what I want you to think about. So let's look at that. For the morrow, the Bible says in an older translation, for the morrow will be anxious or shall take thought for things of itself. And I had to pause and think about this in my own world. Because we've got all sorts of things going on. Most of it don't know what's around the corner and don't know what's next. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Let me just stop everything. Stop the noise. Stop the track. Silence. Music be silent. What is in today for me to discover that God has prepared as His gifts of love for me in this moment? Because I think when we make our focus so complicated that we're trying to lay out all the options, that we actually miss the moment and we miss the jewel of joy that is found in today. Because I'm stressing about tomorrow. And that's what I think this verse is saying to us. Tomorrow will bring for itself enough worry, but leave that unto tomorrow. I love the thought here, and I'll just bring it in as a parallel thought for you to, I suppose, just weigh up in comparison. But think about God's provision for the people in the desert. After the Exodus, they're wandering through the wilderness for 40 years, and they were grizzly and complainy. Does it sound familiar, like you and me? You know, hey, God, we're in between, and we're not quite sure, and what's going on, and are you going to feed us? And oh my gosh, what about the cabbage we used to eat in Egypt? And God says, look, I'm going to give you every day. When the dew comes down, I'm going to give you manna, which is a substance that you have not created, nor have you seen before, but you shall use it to feed your family. And every morning, when the dew comes down, it's going to settle on the ground for you. And you can go out and collect it. But only collect enough for today. Because, says the Lord, if you collect more than you need for today, then it's going to go moldy and rank. And you definitely won't want to eat it. And sure enough, if they did keep it, it went moldy and rank. But the next day they go out there, and sure enough, the dew comes down and the sun comes up, and the manna is on the ground ready for them to collect, to grind into flour, to make their bread for their family. The point is, in the comparison, what I'm saying is I'm giving the analogy that Jesus says, why would you worry about tomorrow? Just stick on today, focus on today, because tomorrow will have its own worries. We miss the joy of today because we're focused on the worries of tomorrow. It's a distraction. And in doing so, we miss the joy and the gifts of love that are around us every moment because of what Jesus is giving us as a demonstration of the Father's love in this moment today. And so therefore, I ask myself, should our prayers be focused on the here and now, or should our prayers not be focused on the future? Might be a better way to say it. And so I was pondering that, and please don't hear me making rules, and please don't I'm not saying don't pray for your future, but when I look at the prayer of Jesus that he gave us in Matthew chapter 6. Some people call it the Lord's Prayer. Well, it's spoken by the Lord, but it's a gift to us, so you could call it our prayer. But when the disciples said, teach us how to pray, he led them through what's in Matthew chapter 6, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your holy name. You might have heard that before. What I'm suggesting to you is, if you look at that prayer, I dare you to look at that prayer and see how much of it focuses on tomorrow. And I'm going to spoil it for you. I'm going to say none of it does. Go on, prove me wrong. Jesus gives us a model of prayer and teaches us to pray, to seek the Father, and yet he doesn't focus on tomorrow except to say, deliver us from the temptation of the evil one, which will come. And I find that fascinating, friends. I find that fascinating. So what I want to reiterate is, why would you let tomorrow's worries steal from you the joy today offers? If you've listened to me long enough, you'll know I repeat myself, because some of the most common things that we need to keep repeating are the most obvious, and yet we forget them the most. The devil has a limited stack of cards in his hand, and the three cards that I often repeat that he will use is isolation, which is a form of dividing you away from your family of faith. Distraction, meaning he can take you away from focusing on what God's got for you. And a deviation, which means like a misappropriation of the truth. And 1 degree off is a deviation, and 1 degree off means you miss the mark, which is actually the definition of the word sin. So the devil really just plays those three cards over and over, and we don't usually recognize it. what I'm suggesting to you is distraction. To focus on tomorrow instead of today is a trick the devil uses us into, dividing ourselves away from Jesus. Jesus is omnipresent. He's outside time, and yet I find he's always in today. And when I go and worry about tomorrow, I don't often find Jesus in that space. Why? Because he's in today. He sorted out yesterday. He's sitting in today waiting for me to hang out with him. And I often go into tomorrow and worry about that. And so tomorrow will take care of itself, friends. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Jesus is saying, look, it's going to come. And when it comes, it will come with something that will require you to need me. And I'll be there. But I'm not there today. Because today I'm in today, I'm not in tomorrow. So don't go into tomorrow today, because you won't find Jesus in tomorrow today, because Jesus is in today. Commit yourself, therefore, Jesus says, commit your way to God. So what is the practical solution? I've been wrestling with this because I'm trying to work out how I'm going to posture my prayers when I'm making sure that I'm doing what I'm realizing I'm telling you to do, and that is not to spend my prayer time in tomorrow. So, what is God got for me today? And I went back in Matthew chapter 6 because I figured if that's where Jesus is hanging out, then we should probably find the answers there. And I found it in the prayer that Jesus taught us. And so I just want to give you 3 simple keys that you could perhaps consider, and you could perhaps try over the next week and see how it changes how complicated you feel life is. Because maybe it might bring your focus back into connection with Jesus, which will means as the Lord of peace, he will remove the complication. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway. So firstly, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. And I feel like the first key, as simple as it is to say, I feel like we need to remind ourselves that God is the great I am. Exodus chapter 3, when Moses says, who shall I tell them has sent me? He says, I am. He is all sufficient. He is above all things. He is in all things. He's over all things. He is the God of all things. He is El Shaddai, the Lord God Almighty. He is Yahweh, who spoke all of creation into existence, who sustains our lives by his breath that is in us. He is God, and you are not. And I tell myself that often. I do, because I have to remind myself that as I focus on tomorrow and worry about tomorrow and try and work out all the parameters and the options and the inputs and the outcomes and who might do what and how might I survive the circumstances I'm in, and I realize that I just got to make sure I don't. The reason I got my finger stuck in that page is because that's where I need to hang out, and that's where Jesus is, and that's where God is. And so when I pray, I say, God, you are God and I am not. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom, your kingdom come. You are the king of the kingdom. May your will be done in my life as is already established in heaven. Like I said, friends, it sounds just so simple to remind us of this, but I kind of feel like we're the ones that mess it up. So maybe we just go back to the basics, and it won't be so complicated if we do. The second key that I wanted to share with you is the next verse in the prayer that Jesus gives us, and that's verse 11. Give unto us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's verse 11 and verse 12. And what I mean to say by highlighting those 2 verses is I think we should absolutely put our confidence not in our ability to work things out, but in God's provision for today. And that's why I told you the story of the manna in the wilderness, because it's the most brilliant example of God bringing all of his sufficiency into today and putting us in a position where he says, hey, I want you to trust me for the tomorrow you can't see. Think about that. When they went out to collect the manna, they had to collect enough for whoever was in their tent and just for today. And if you thought, oh man, what if God doesn't turn up tomorrow? You might be deceived. And you might be deceived into collecting some more manna than you need and storing it away in case God doesn't turn up tomorrow. And then it goes rank and it stinks and it infects your whole tent and everyone's like, what are you doing, you doofus? You shouldn't have collected that because look, God's here today. He actually turned up like he promised he would. So I think we need to trust God's provision for today. Sit in today with Jesus and say, Jesus, you are enough for me for today. But the reason why I drag verse 12 into this bullet point, forgive us our trespasses as we have also forgiven those who trespass against us. We've got to trust God's provision of grace. So I'm not just talking about God's provision of manna or food or finance or safety or a roof over your head. All those things are awesome and they're important. But I'm extending this point to say, come on, trust that God's grace is sufficient. It's all that you need for the struggles of today. God, I don't feel big enough for today. God, I don't have the answers for today. My grace is sufficient. Jesus says to Paul, 2 Corinthians 12, my strength is all you need, and in my strength, my grace is sufficient for you. It's worth considering that, friends. So the first one, trust God for who he is. He is God, and you are not. Secondly, trust that God is awesome to provide all the things that you need for today, including the grace for today. The good, the bad, the ugly, the challenge, the people you don't want to talk about, the people you don't want to forgive, the people you're not enjoying having in your life. God's grace is sufficient for today. And the third thing that I wanted to say to you is found in verse 13. Bring us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And what I love about this is we have to trust God's guidance and his protection. Because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but I do know, according to Jesus, tomorrow's worries will be enough for tomorrow. So I'm not denying that tomorrow won't be a challenge. I'm actually saying that I trust Jesus will be meeting me in tomorrow and that his guidance and protection will be sufficient for all that I need. So I can't see into tomorrow, but I don't need to see into tomorrow because Jesus can. And as long as I stay connected to him, then I don't need to bounce myself into tomorrow and get distracted, divided, or isolated in the way the devil might like. So the solution, friends, commit therefore your way unto God. Do that by trusting who he is. Do that by trusting his provision. And do that by trusting his guidance and protection. And in that, I think we will come back to the simple things of life, the simple things of faith, and realizing that control is not faith. So therefore, let us find faith, not control. What I want you to do as I close is I want you to sit on that. I want you to take the concept back to the Lord in prayer and say, are there areas of the way that I see today where I'm seeking control, not faith? Are there areas of my family or my health or my work that I'm trying to take control of, that I'm not looking at through the lens of faith for today? And I ask you, Jesus, to help me with this so that I don't try and be God, because I'm not God. I confess that, you are God. You are our Father, and you say our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's a recalibration. It sets you under his rule and his reign in his kingdom, not your own kingdom. So calm before God and do that. Is there any way in which I'm making my life complicated by focusing on things I'm trying to control? And I'm focusing on tomorrow instead of today. Help me to find you in my today. Man, that would be the best prayer that any of us could pray tomorrow morning. Jesus, help me to find you in today. And then expect him to. Just sit and wait and trust him and allow him to reveal himself to you, because I believe he will. Now, friends, we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to say it's been great hanging out with you. I've enjoyed my coffee with you, so may your week be amazing. I'm now going to go and prepare my argument or my presentation to maybe perhaps seek approval for an upgrade on my coffee grinder. And this might be not a short story, a long story, but I'll keep you posted on how I'm going. But in the meantime, take care, have faith, drink good coffee, and I look forward to being back with you real soon. God bless.